Hello, hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon Special Edition. Yes, it's another 5S. 5S. And we are continuing the panel discussion on mental illness. Now, if you have not heard the first show, you can find it at skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. And this show will be on that same page. And the discussion section from Discuss, Disqus, will be open. So just log in and discuss away. And you do not have to go back and listen to that show before you listen to this one. It's not serialized in that way. You don't have to listen to both of them. You can just choose. As it happens, this is a conversation with a couple of Christians. One of our guests wasn't able to make it because they took ill. So I'm sure that they'll recover soon, but we'll pick them up later, probably in a post show in a week or two. And so we'll hear from Randall Rouser, but not this morning. It's okay because we've already got too much talent on deck. I don't know what we're going to do with it all. We've got Marvin Wallace. You all know Marvin. He's a regular on podcasts from time to time. He doesn't show up on this channel very often. It's always a pleasure. Welcome, Marvin.
Thank you very much, David.
And we have David Russell, the other David, you might call him. Please call him that. He used to be a co-host on Skeptics and Seekers. It was a fantastic season, and it is always great to share a mic with David Russell. David, how are you?
I'm good, buddy, man. Thanks for having me along, man.
Very excellent. And
good to see you again.
I forgot to do this in the other show, so I'm just going to do this right now. David, plug away. I know that you've got a new podcast going on, so it's no longer proselytize and prosecute. I never can remember something like that.
No,
it's something even better.
Well, yeah, back in May, me and my friend from the Complete Sinners Guide decided to merge shows to open up more topics and so forth. And we did that. And we had a great launch event in May, and it's called Faith Unaltered. And yeah, check us out on YouTube. We're also on the radio in North Dakota, in the Grand Rapids region on KEQQ radio. So yeah,
you are moving up in the world. Radio, you finally made it to a dead medium.
A dead medium.
Congratulations. Is that a promotion? I'm not sure. You're in charge of the radio division. So, hey, congratulations. That's fantastic. Marvin, what have you been on lately?
What shows have I been on?
Yeah.
I think the last show that I was on, it was with Dale, and it was an interview with Michael Behe. So I listened a lot and learned a lot.
I would have loved to been able to have a conversation with Michael Behe.
Because I was able to ask questions that I couldn't resolve in my own mind and didn't have answers to the guy who wrote the book, and he gave some very interesting answers. So that was real fun.
Yeah.
That's and that must be over a year ago now, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, that one's going to have legs for a while, I imagine. So good catch there.
I've been working. I'm a secondary school teacher, so that takes a lot of time. And when I'm not teaching, I try to read if I'm not exhausted.
What do you teach, if you don't mind me asking?
I teach English, and I also teach a broad range of humanities, so critical thinking, literature and English.
Excellent. Excellent. All very needed things at the secondary level. Guys, let's get into it. Let's talk about this. This is I wish I had a spiked glove, a mace, a hammer, uh, and we could just play in the pit for an hour or two. But that's not this kind of show. I don't have any of that. I actually don't think that either side, the Christians or atheists, have any kind of rhetorical advantage with regard to mental illness. I don't think that mental illness cares what your ideology is. But ideologies can affect the way we deal with mental illness and people with mental illness and our own mental illnesses. And so um, there is no doubt that ideology will come up in this discussion. But let's just start with some easy softball introductory questions and kind of see where we go from there. Marvin, without going into any details at all, do you have people in your life that suffer from mental illness?
Yeah, I've had people in my life that suffer from mental illness, very close as well.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, one of them is now passed away.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my sister, and I just think that everybody is prone to depression at some time and anxiety at some time, to varying degrees. So I'm not sure I've really met anybody who's not had mental illness if it's defined like that.
Sure. Um, my brother, my oldest brother, is severely bipolar,
Right.
and that leads to some interesting things. Um, but that was a very difficult thing for me to understand and accept when I was younger. So I didn't really take it well, and whatever I did in that regard, I'm sure it was the wrong thing. But I at the time, I think it was going under the name of manic depressant or something like that. I
Mhm.
think it's the same thing rebadged. So if you know any bipolar people, you can guess what some of the difficulties were there. Russell, you got any uh, friends, family, people? Once again, you don't have to be specific who suffer from mental illnesses.
No, I mean, I don't mind being specific, you know. Yeah, I have it's all around me. It's around me every day. I'm talking to you, David. I mean, there's a
I'm on my
spike
meds.
glove. No, I'm
Take it.
just joking. No. No, seriously, guys, like yeah, as your audience knows, when my mother was sick and was going through her cancer, um yeah, man, I went down there to take care of her, and she suffered for a long time after the cancer with severe mental illnesses that, cancer messes you up mentally,
Mhm.
especially when you already deal with, like you said, manic depression. Because I think that's like the step before bipolar.
Mhm.
That's how I've always taken it. Somebody that's manically depressed, suffers with manic depression, does a lot of wild things, but when they're in bipolar, they do a lot wilder things. So, but yeah, so and then yeah, recently I have somebody very close to me that uh exhibits the same signs as her mother, and I've had to deal with deal with that. We've had to um, get her help and stuff like that. So yeah, it's all around me. I myself have suffered from depression. I think Marvin hit it right when he said we all have different varying degrees of depression here and there. I think that's just part of human life that we do experience bouts of depression from time to time. I don't know if I would classify that as a illness, I mean, yeah, maybe like a temporary illness, but because there's times we get out of it. Um, there's sometimes, and I've told you this before, David, that I struggle with apathy,
Mhm.
you know, which is from depression at times, and severe apathy I think could be a mental illness, but it's periodic. I don't think that I'm a long-term sufferer of any type of mental illness, except the illnesses you think I have, David. But
No, you're good. Look, I'm so distracted because I'm using both eyes, which I never do. So I'm going to put on my eye patch, which has very little to
Pi-
do with the audience and
pirate,
more to do
hey,
with me.
pirate it up, bro.
I
Pirate it up.
am that way I'll be able to focus.
Yeah,
I
so
would
I
have put
really
my
do
hat
think
on
it's
if
real.
you two guys were going to wear hats as well.
All right. Also, hand me all your loot. Um, so, yeah, it's one of the problems I find with mental illness is just knowing when you're dealing when you're dealing with mental illness and when you're dealing with just a normal human thing like grief or job anxiety or things like that. If you get fired and that's your only source of income, you're gonna go through some stuff. Um, so what's the difference between just being sad or anxious about that in a very normal, natural, healthy way and being mentally ill? When after my accident, I went through what I even could classify at the time was a fairly deep depression.
Mhm.
Um, but then again, if you talk to a doctor, they will say, yeah, well, your leg is broken and you don't know if you're going to walk again or even if you're going to keep your leg. So that it would be natural that it would be some kind of mental illness if you didn't go through some kind of depression. And so the question becomes, well, how do you know when you've crossed the line into something that needs more treatment as opposed to you're just experiencing life as a human?
Right on. Yeah, I gotta say, like, I think that you're onto something there. Like when you guys were talking in your show, Andrew brought up some very pointed facts, and I think that what he said was true in that aspect, that doctors do have a good handle on a lot of this stuff. However, there's these ranges there, and I agree with what you said. We're in the infancy stages of figuring stuff out, but I think it's also the reason it's a both and is because there's a range that this stuff can fall into, and
Mhm.
pinpointing that range I think can be difficult.
Marvin, any insight? How do you know when you've crossed a
Well,
line into something
yeah,
clinical?
I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the individual does know when they have crossed the line. That's perhaps why it's a good idea to have good friends and close family, and people that you can talk to let you know where you are in terms of mental illness. So, for example, a good friend of mine went back to the UK from Hong Kong and had a really bad experience. Came back to Hong Kong and he was stuck in a rut, and he just repeated the same thing over and over again.
Hmm.
It took I don't know if he could recognize that himself, but it took friends to say, look, you're stuck in a place here and you need to get out of that place that you're stuck in. So I think it takes good friends, family to help that person know that, there's a line and that they've stuck. I don't know if you'd say across that line or before that line, but they're stuck in a place that they need to get out of. Like you say, we all at some time suffer from depression in varying degrees, and it's perhaps not unnatural, perhaps not unnecessary, but it can be a place where we're kind of in a negative spiral that just never seems to end. And I think sometimes we need another pair of eyes to help us see that.
maybe it's helpful to have some time limits. Um,
Mhm.
I know that there are some cultures, for instance, that if a spouse dies, there's a time of grieving, and then
Mhm.
after that time, you get back to life. This community expects you to get going again. There might be something healthy in that. No, I don't know what the right time limits of things
Mhm.
were or are, but I know that that is a method that some societies use, and it could be that as friends of people and family of people, when they've gone through something severe and they're going through a bad place, you give them a period of time when they go through that bad place. And then after
Yeah,
which, if they're still there, then you give them a nudge.
right. Yeah, like I agree. But that is how it works. I mean, you send counselors usually have treatment plans, and once those treatment plans are there, and they think the person has a handle on it, they release them. So that is part of I think seeing a good counselor, a good shrink, or I mean that was like the 1980 word for it, but
Mm,
but yeah, like I think there is that aspect to you know I guess treating mental illness,
mm.
right? So there's treatable mental illness where you can treat somebody, give them the tools that they need to overcome it. And there's times that they do overcome it, and there's times where they sink back into it, and the next thing you know, they're back to the counselor doing another treatment. So there is that is a very real thing. So there is time limits on these things sometimes. If you want to look at it like that, I would say more of there are treatment options out there. Some it takes with medication, sometimes it takes with behavioral therapy. So I
Mhm.
mean, there's all sorts of things. This is why I agreed it's a both and, because yeah, we haven't even touched the surface of neurology, and we're only scratching the surface of that field. Um, but there are some facts that doctors and psychologists they've been dealing with for a very long time. They've got successful treatment plans. They've got successful things, methods that they use, and those methods work. And so yeah, that's where I kind of like am on the whole time limit thing, I think.
So, I mean, that brings us to a logical question, though, which is when you are serving that function as uh, the watcher of someone else who's going through a bad place. You are the sounding board, you are the other ear, you're the responsible person who's not going through a mental illness episode, and so you can kind of gauge when they are, because you know them best, and you know when their behavior is not normal for a long period of time. How do you have that conversation? Matt in the other show uh, had some very important things to say about the language that we use to talk about mental illness, and I think it was correct. I've been thinking about this ever since then. Um, all I can do is shrug my shoulders, share ignorance, and say whatever language we use, it has to be rather more sensitive than the language we have traditionally used, because mental illness is one of those things. Mental health, I may be using the wrong language already. That's one of those things that people are very sensitive about. It's a very personal issue. It's like a wart on the tip of your nose. Everybody can see it, and you don't, just quit staring at it. That's how people would feel. So, some of the language we use would just serve to put their back up and make them less likely to get help rather than more. So a couple of topics here that I'm going to leave you to share some wisdom on. How do we destigmatize mental health so that it just becomes a normal part of health, kind of like when you got a when you have tendonitis, it's a normal thing, and no one's ashamed if they have tendonitis in the elbow or the knee. But there is a stigma around mental health. So how do we get past that? And what kind of language should we be using to talk about it so as not to alienate people more?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think one of the things that we can do to destigmatize issues surrounding mental health is to kind of let the general population know how widespread mental health is, or mental health problems are. So, for example, I'm reading a book by J.P. Moreland at the moment, and he mentions that I think as much as 40% of the US population suffers from anxiety and depression. I can't remember if it was one or the other or both, but that's obviously 4 out of 10 people. So if we, if we educate people in a sense to know how widespread those problems are, the less stigmatized it is. And the more we educate people to know how widespread those problems are, hopefully the less of those problems we will have as people get used to dealing with them.
Yeah, I agree with Marvin there. I think that's very important to destigmatize this whole notion of mental health, and it's so widespread, and there's so many contributing factors to it. I mean, diet, for example. I mean,
Mhm.
that can cause mental health issues. I mean, cause severe depression. You know, um, but yeah, on a wide range. A funny story, not funny if if you're the person that was going through it. But my mother, when she was alive, she had one of her bipolar um, explosions, should I say? And she calls me about 2, 3 in the morning at the hospital, and she's like, "Come and get me." And I'm like, "Where are you at?" And she's like, "I'm at the hospital." And the nurse is like, "Don't come and get her. She's going to jail. She's assaulted a cop."
Mm.
you know? So I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "They can't take me." And I'm like, "Yeah, they can." And of course, they took her to the psych ward, um, and put her there, and because she was having suicidal thoughts,
Mm.
and then didn't want to go. And when the cop was like, "No, you got to. We got to keep you under observation," she went off on him. You know, so I bring that up to say that you know it's not always easy for people to admit that they have this problem, and they're we're coming out of a stage in our society where we are trying to destigmatize this. I think we can only do what we are doing, and we can continue to do it. Now that's on a populist level. I mean, we've gotten rid of the insane asylums that just were ruthless to people,
Mhm.
lobotomizing people and trying all these shock treatments and this and that.
Yeah,
And
Bellevue is one
well,
of the big names
Penhurst
that
Asylum.
come to mind. Just a funny aside, uh, when my leg was broken, the ambulance took me to Bellevue. That's where I was
Oh,
treated, same place.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
good
I mean,
orthopedic
they
unit,
shut.
but I was thinking the whole time, isn't this an insane asylum? Why am I? Why are they taking me here?
Yeah.
So,
Well, me and you both are literally sandwiched. You in New Jersey and me in Virginia between where Penhurst was,
hmm,
and that was one of the most disgusting places. Then where they would tuck away the mentally ill, and I mean, it was almost like Holocaust conditions. You see these people, you know, 30, 40 people to a room, sometimes 100 to a room where they're, defecating on themselves and stuff like this. And we're coming out of that. We're only, I think, two, 3 generations, not even that. No, it's not even that. It's probably 1.5 generations, away from Penhurst times. Um, so yeah, another thing is the personal level, right? And how we feel about it. I think there's a big relational level that we have to get to, and we need the information. We can't remain ignorant to it any longer. One thing for the loved one that I have still with me, um, is I have to go and have progress reports every once in a while, and the counselor will have me and my loved one leave the room and talk to me, and she can't obviously divulge what they're talking about, obviously, but she gives me tips. She gives me tips on how to word things, how to use language, giving me ideas that I didn't have before. And then she takes my ideas and she's like, "Hey, yeah, that's good. Do it this way," you know. And then she's like, also tells me where to draw the line, because you still have to draw the line in certain areas, and it's very important. And so there is a relational aspect, there is a personal aspect, there's a one-on-one, because we all deal with the mentally ill one-on-one, and even within ourselves we can take those tips and turn them and use them internally. And yeah, so there's this personal level and there's that societal level, and they blend together. And so yeah, to destigmatize societally, but then
Mhm.
also getting the proper tools and education that you need to deal with it personally and with the ones you love, I think would be the greatest way we can continue that endeavor.
So
Agreed.
I'm just gonna get out there and say I have not um, been a great example of using healthy language around this subject, and quite unintentionally. And I'll just give you an example. I often, I mean, really often, several times a day, might refer to someone that I've popped up in the news or whatever, reading an article, and I might say, "Man, that person's crazy pants," or "That person's a nut job," and I know this is a new one. This is a new one that no one has heard me say. Bat shit crazy.
Mhm.
Um, so let me let me just say that when I use terms like this, I'm not actually ever referring to someone's mental condition. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not even referring to their intellectual capacity in any way. What I'm saying is that is a ridiculous thing, and perfectly normal, sane human beings come up with ridiculous things. They say ridiculous things. They do ridiculous things. They think ridiculous things. And one of the things that makes them perfectly normal, insane, is that you can have conversations with them. You can confront them. You can ridicule the ridiculous, and they can learn better, do better. They can interact. They can debate whether their idea is ridiculous or not. They're not mentally unhealthy. They're just way off into left field and into what anyone would consider a crazy idea, a silly idea. And you should, there's got to be a way for people to say, "Hey, that's nuts. Don't do that. Don't stick your tongue onto the frozen pole." I mean,
Mhm.
that's crazy. Okay, stop it. Um,
Sure.
so that's one level of language, but I get the distinct impression that people don't understand that nuance when uh, I say it, and I need to set a better example. I really am not referring to someone who I think is mentally ill. If I was interacting with someone who I actually thought had a mental incapacity, I would never refer to them or that condition in that way. In fact, I would not continue the conversation uh, in the way that I was if I've come to believe that a person actually has a serious mental illness. And so I just want to make that clear. And I'm not trying to make excuses because I'm going to try to, find better language and better ways to express that because I think it is normal and healthy for you to be able to tell someone or there's someone you're interacting with, that's nuts, without it being taken as, oh, I think that you have a mental incapacity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm gonna try to find better ways to distinguish those things and talk to people and disagree with people. And so I'm just gonna come out and say that I'll begin that effort. It's an effort. I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail today. Um, in fact, I would like some. What is the Catholics give out for when you want to sin in advance and you want the forgiveness up front? What's that called? Uh,
You want an indulgence.
Indulgence. Yes, I'm going to need probably 3 indulgences for this podcast. So,
Well, here's the funny thing is you bring that up, but that's serious. And when you're dealing with somebody that has mental illness, there are life changing things that you have to go through, especially when you're dealing with a loved one. And it would behoove, but it would behoove you to look into how to do that because there's sometimes I've been too dismissive, right? Because you're dealing with two imperfect people trying to figure this thing out, and there's a third person that's giving you the steps to do it, and then you, instead of just being dismissive when you think it's just something minor, that minor thing could be a big deal with the person with the mental issue,
mhm,
and you could just be dismissive. But when you're working with those tools in mind, you're able to ask questions to see where that person is and then offer a better way or another option. And it's not even a better way. It's not even saying, okay, this is better, this is worse, right? You want to give them other options, you know, to what they're going through. And that's one way that you can educate yourself, is yourself learning those options and learning to either read your loved one or the person that's going through that mental illness, reading them a little better, or just being more sensitive because you're dealing with a person that has that, and being able to interject when you see that that is necessary, you know. But yeah, I mean, that was one of the big hurdles for me in dealing with my loved one, was not being so dismissive all the time. Because I've went through some stuff myself, and then I try to apply that experience and the resolutions that helped me, but it's not going to help that person. We live in a whole different time.
mhm.
We're not kids in the 80s that hook cards to our spokes to our bicycles and ride 3 hours a day. No, they come home and they play video games. It's a whole
Mhm.
different world. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So you have to, yeah, there has to be that medium,
I did the
so
cards and the spokes, but I actually thought I invented it. I came up with the idea. I bet if I do the, it turns out that others had invented it before me. So, yeah. So what I would just add the sensitivity component. Even though I might not be meaning some type of pejorative uh, that's referring to some mental incapacity, the person that I am talking to, or the person who's hearing it, especially on a podcast, because you don't know who's listening, they might actually have a mental illness, and they are not going to
Mm-hmm.
be able to make that distinction at all. If you say, man, that's crazy. Because what they're going to hear is you saying, you're crazy. And guess what? If they have a mental illness, they've heard that all their life. Um, so I look, folks. I'm in my 50s. I grew up. I'm a child of a certain time and culture. It is going to be very, very difficult for me to learn new ways to talk about things.
Mm-hmm.
I will try, but cut me a little bit of slack if it doesn't happen overnight. This is, like I said, very new to me. Just thinking about this is very new to me, and I'm not used to being terribly sensitive around this topic. This is just one of those topics you never talk about. You know, you don't ask people how much money they make. and you don't ask them about their mental health. You just don't do it. And so we're
Mhm.
coming into a time period where we do have to be, uh, if I can use a word that's going to rile the guests, a bit more woke
Mhm.
um, with this sort of thing. And I am no more woke, honestly,
Mhm.
than anyone else. And I'm just starting to wake up a little bit. And it's a very new and uncomfortable thing to me as I look back on my life and how I've interacted with people and some of the things that I have said publicly that could be misconstrued as something else. And I have to face the fact that I've been very much a part of the problem, and I'm trying to figure out how to be a part of the solution now.
Mhm.
Marvin,
Well,
how have you made yourself a
yeah.
part of the solution?
Well, I was just going to interject there. The first thing I was going to say is, yeah, I think we are made more sensitive of some of these issues through the prevalence of what you might call the woke culture. Okay, I agree with you on that point. But where you might be surprised is I don't think that everything that is taught by woke culture is bad. I think being sensitive to mental health issues is a good thing. Um, we do have to factor into that sort of a lot of historic language may refer to mental illness, but not in the sense of making fun of illness, but just consternation. So, for example, uh, my my father's from Jamaica, and a very kind of popular thing they say is, "You're mad,"
Mm-hmm.
right? So, for example, I might say, he might ask me, "Who do you think's going to win the boxing match?" And I'll say, "Muhammad Ali." I'll say, "You're mad. You know this guy's been training for 20 years, right?" I don't think he doesn't really mean you have a mental illness, but I do think there's a sort of a colloquialism and sort of synonyms are attached to consternation more than actually pointing out that people may have a mental problem. But I'm more than willing to try to adjust my language as best I can to be more sensitive of these issues. So, in that sense, yeah, I'm prepared to be a little bit more woke about it. I don't
Yeah.
know how you feel about that, David Russell.
Oh, what was that?
He is
I wonder
clearly
how you
not
feel
woke.
about that. So
He's,
I'm, I'm acquiescing to wokeness in that sense.
Yeah, there's okay, so like I said, there's a fine line, right? There is a line. Let me just give you an example of how I deal with this and what I've learned from the psychiatrist that I talk to. I can pretty much sit there with my loved one and say, "You cray cray,
Mhm.
right? You mad,
Hmm.
um, completely fine, right? We're completely on that level of relationship and this and that. But if I'm hanging out with my sister in law and I say, "You're retarded," and I'm using that word, sorry guys if it offends, and I say, "You're retarded," that is one of the biggest offenses for her that I could ever say. So I
Mhm.
don't use that language. So it's again, there's a big part of this is knowing your audience,
Hmm.
obviously, knowing um because I bet nothing by it, it's just a language that I employ just joking around, but and I trust me, and David knows I like that crass, blunt, punch you in the face humor, so like I like, I think random craziness is fun, and it's funny, um but you know, you got to know your audience. You've got to deal with people on that personal level. And I think, that's kind of like where I learned how to draw the line was, um, learning to be more sensitive. And like you said, I guess you guys want to call it woke in that aspect. But yeah.
So, since we have slightly breached an area where we could have potentially had some disagreement, but didn't, let's just go ahead and kick the door open. Let's give the audience what they've been waiting for, shall we? Um, I'm looking through a list of questions. I know there are a list of questions that the skeptics ask at the end of the Skeptic Show, but I actually want to start with one that kind of flows naturally from this conversation that we're having about the language that we use with mental health, because it has been my contention for a little while now that um, I think Christians do something similar to what skeptics do, what we all do. You know, we talk about mental illness sometimes with code words. And I think for Christians, the code word is often demonic. Uh, I think I have seen uh, and been the target of the use of, demonic in very unfair ways. Uh, and sometimes I think when the Christian says something like that, makes reference to the demonic in terms of a person, that just may be a way that they are using to talk about something else like mental illness. So if you saw the show on Tuesday, I played a video and I included a video clip of, can't remember the preacher's name. And he was going over the story of the demoniac possessed by Legion, which they were eventually cast down to the pigs. That one. And he was perfectly happy to talk about that story in terms of this guy was mentally ill. And, the demons were more metaphor for mental illness. I think that Christians are more and more doing that sort of thing. I see where he's going there, and I appreciated his effort. But what I don't appreciate is conflating demon possession or demon activity with mental illness. Mental illness is not a demon, and I think it's harmful to talk about it that way. So that said, what as Christians, and I'm a former Christian, was a Christian more of my life than I was an atheist. Um, what do you think about that proposition that Christians sometimes conflate the demonic with mental illness? Uh, where does the demonic fit into all of this?
Well, that's a good question. You know, I remember back in 2013, I think no, it was earlier than that, 2010. I was studying in Biola, Southern California, an evangelical um, university. And a fellow started to build altars in his dorm and burn sacrifices um, to ward off evil spirits. And the counselors at the university said to him, "Do you think you could have mental illness?" He accepted that. He ended up getting a diagnosis of being bipolar and ended up dropping out of the university but taking medication. So I'm unsure where you draw the line personally. But I will give another example which goes the other way. And that is I remember once when I was about in my early 20s, and I went to pray for a guy, and his countenance just changed. It's like another voice came out from within him that was deep, that was guttural, that had a sort of a tangible, I don't know how you would call it, fear to it. And to this day, I just can't explain what happened. So I'm not going to discount the demonic based on that experience, but I do recognize that not every person who appears to be suffering from mental illness is demonically oppressed. It can be mental illness.
Okay, we'll explore that idea a little bit.
Mhm.
Russell's been itching to jump in there.
No, I just been listening, man. I just try to figure out the best way to sit with the way this camera option's giving me. If I to go over this way, I get cut off here. If I go over that way, I get cut off here.
We
But
actually
so
like it best when you're cut off. Yeah,
I
more to the
know,
left,
yeah,
more.
yeah. Shit me in the face there. Smack me, smack me. But no, yeah, like no, I hear you. Yeah, drawing the line. There is a line. So again, um, I love the question you posed here when you said, and I know you went deeper into it, but it's kind of the same question. Do you see mental illness as a physical or spiritual problem? And I thought that was a really good question because, I mean, you would expect that it affects both because we're body and soul. As a Christian, that's how we believe, right? So, but I praised you guys. I praised you guys in that first hour of your conversation. I think it devolved at around a minute 10. And that's because David started speaking, but but it devolved a bit. But then you picked it back up at the end.
Mm.
But one of the things that really stuck out to me was that you lumped and you kind of contradicted yourself here, but you lumped a 1% margin of Christianity, which is big. It's a lot of people. Don't you know that are those type of fundamentalists that do conflate those two, and it's very damaging, and it affects more homes, and
Mhm.
even when the person stops believing, it causes a trauma that is can cause people not to be open to the idea that this could be a mental health issue, and next thing you know, you have people warding their house with crystals and doing all other sorts of things because of that trauma, because they experienced it from a fundamentalist Christian that had no idea what they were talking about,
So
right?
I
That's
would
a good
have put
question.
it at higher than 1%, though. I don't think it's
It
quite that
might be
low.
it might be
You
it
did
could
say
be,
it's
Dave.
about hyper
What I'm
fundamentalism.
saying, what I'm saying, it's not a high percent. It's really not. I can give you list upon list of like what people actually when they're dealing with the demonic. I just interviewed an exorcist last year, and he said
Why didn't I know about this?
one out of 5,000, 1 out of 5,000 would be classified as an exorcism.
Mhm.
1 out of 5,000. They recognize and they go through grueling tests
Mhm.
to try to decipher between what is demonic versus what is not. Right. So
So
they do have tests. They do these things. And this is
this,
the majority of Christians would do say that you have to go through that because
I'll interject
oh
here,
sorry.
David, because I just saw a guy talking about this a few days ago.
Mhm.
Two of the tests are, it's David Russell, sorry to, and I'll jump out again. One is if that person can speak in a foreign language unlearned. That's
Isn't
one
that
test.
just tongues in
A,
Christian parlance?
a second one is if they know things about other people in the room without any prompting or without any sort of prior knowledge. So I jump out again. Those are two tests that this priest said they use.
But okay, that doesn't seem to
Yeah.
be a
Well,
test for the
it's
demonic.
well.
That
Here's
seems
the
to be a
thing.
test of spiritual gifts. So I'm not. I'm.
Yeah, but there's there's a lot more to it, David. I mean, what I'm trying to say here, and I think what Marvin, uh, I was sure he would add to this. That's not that that's all before a possession is marked as a possession. Those are tests that are part of a numerous amount of tests. They will make sure you get psychological help, and you know what? The Catholic Church will pay for your psychologist
Okay, but how do you
if you
describe
come
then
to
all
them.
of the preachers, all the
Um,
televangelists who
I'm telling you,
speak in
I think
tongues and then go around
okay. No,
pretending to know things about people's
yeah.
lives in the audience? That I
Well,
mean,
let me just put out there that no psychologist will tell you that glossolia is a mental health disorder. But to your
Okay.
point, to your point, David, to your point, you do have a lot of people doing those type of things. You have a lot of people that I think ape the practices of Christianity and have done a lot of wrong. And we're not we're not the only ones guilty of this. I mean, the secular world is just as guilty as doing stuff that causes mental illness as Christians are.
no, I agree
Yeah,
with that, but
yeah.
so
Yeah,
what? I'm not I'm not trying to
no,
make
I know
anyone
you're not.
defensive. Because I have gone
I'm
to
on board
churches.
about this one.
I've
I'm on
gone.
board about this,
Yeah,
by the way,
I've
because
been to churches where this was the norm at the church. I've had many Pentecostal friends. It's a fairly large part of Christianity, especially in America. It's not marginal at all. And in those services, there is a lot of glossolalia, as you put it. Great word, by the way. It's one of those words that kind of means what it sounds like it means.
Right.
And and there's a lot of divination. I can see that you have just broken up with your boyfriend, and I have a word for the Lord from you. So yeah, I mean, if these are signs of demonic, how do you then distinguish what's demonic and what's Holy Spirit?
Okay. Well, yeah. That's a whole nother question. And uh, let me first just say six. Pentecostals only make up 6% of Christendom. I mean, that's just all there is to it. However, they also have the largest number of depressed people in their faction.
Okay, if you
So
send me links to those numbers, I will include it in
I
the
would
show notes.
what, I wish I could. I do have
well,
some of the stuff
I mean,
printed out, but
I'm gonna interject here, and I'll say this again. And I was trying to say this before. I'm borderline of glossolalia. Yeah, I think it's a phenomenon that is okay. I don't think it's a non-biblical phenomena, but I do draw the line at sort of gifts that could be seem to be exercised in order to manipulate people.
Mhm.
And even as a charismatic or a Pentecostal stroke charismatic, I think that's the area where those people do a disservice to Christianity rather than a service.
yeah, I
You
think
know,
there's a oh, sorry.
it's
Sorry.
okay. You know, when they're exercising gifts and the gifts seem to be, God told me to tell you to give money for this project
Mhm.
and X Y Z. I just think they do a disservice, and that doesn't seem to square with Scripture. And I think any behaviour that's taking place in the church must square with Scripture.
So this is not the demon show, and I don't want to I don't want
Of
to
course.
I know that's the show that everyone would love to hear, but I do have some follow up on the demonic here. So if I'm hearing you both correctly, is it do you believe that that demonic forces can cause or contribute to mental illness? Is that in the playbook of possibilities?
For me, I'd say yes. I think it's possible.
I would say yeah. I mean, I would see that it could affect your mental health and as well as your physical health. So I think those things can be. I think they're rare. I think the vast majority of mental health problems are mental health problems. Uh, I think,
When you say that, you mean
and I
just
would.
mental health problems.
Now remember, what's that?
So when you say that, you mean they're just mental health problems with no other
Yeah,
influence. Okay.
absolutely,
All right.
absolutely. And they can affect Christians just as well as they can affect anybody else in the world. We live in, and if the Christian wants to deny that, then they're not. They haven't read the Bible. To me, the Bible even distinguishes between mental disorders and so on. So, you know, it's not just that though. It's such an epidemic in every facet of our culture, in every facet of our human experience. That to say it's purely demonic. This is why I praised your that video that you guys critiqued.
Mhm.
I praised you guys in that because no, that guy, come on, man. Yeah, I praised his effort. Yes, he's trying to help people or do whatever he's trying to do. But when he says deal with it, deal with yourself, that's the exact opposite of what Christianity tells you. It's Christianity tells you when you're in the bottom of the muck that he reaches his hand down and saves you. He meets you where you're at. That's the message that Christ brings out. Not, you know, deal with it. Yeah, there's are some things that we have to deal with. Like there's some things that we have to bandage our wounds. We have to, lace up our boots and get after it. There are some times like that. But when you're on a public platform and you're actually using the Bible in some grotesque way to make that point, you really, like Marvin said, you do a disservice to
Yeah,
Christianity, and it
I'm.
does make us look bad, and it also, it doesn't help.
I grew up hearing the line that God helps those who help themselves, as if that were in the Bible anywhere. And I rather think a better message, whether it's in the Bible or not, is God helps those who can't help themselves. That
Mhm.
that actually seems to be more of a Jesusic approach. Um, and I so if you are in a place where you are suffering and you can't help yourself, you're spiraling through addiction. You can't break it. You've been trying for years. And if you got to fix it before God can fix you, you're screwed. And so I am very dubious of messages that sound like they're saying God helps those who help themselves.
I agree, absolutely. You should be,
Oh, I
and
agree.
uh, we're relational beings for a reason, and we're here to help each other for a reason. We live in a real world that suffers from entropy, suffers from decay, death. So the fact that not only does our reality confirm it, but also the scripture confirms it for us, and you ignore that, and you think you can use God like a genie in a bottle, you're sorely mistaken.
So I still I can feel the back of my brain where the skeptics are listening in to this and they have some follow-up questions. I'm not looking at any comments. There are no, but I know what's coming, and so if I don't follow up in certain ways, I'm going to be crucified. And as you know, crucifixion is bad. Although I
Mhm.
hear you can come back from it pretty well. Um, so that's that was unworthy. Yes, it was. So I if satanic influence can be any part of it, 1% of it, 1% of the time, if it has any place at all in mental illness, then we have a problem because you don't know what part of it is biological and what part of it is uh, otherworldly, supernatural. And so, uh, as I understand how Christians think about this, you can't deal with supernatural problems through natural means. Um, so you, it seems important that you would have to be able to identify the demonic influence of mental illness if you're going to fully treat it. So how do you make that distinction if you believe that Satan can or the demonic realm can be a part? of what's going on in a person's mental illness.
Hmm. You know, I read this week in JP's book that I think 60% of mental illness is actually hereditary. Okay. So you can have a genetic predisposition to things like depression and anxiety. A lot of it is learned behavior as well. I think 20% is learned behavior. So I think you begin by treating mental illness as if it's a physical problem. If you can't treat that physical problem, then I suppose you can look at other methods to treat that illness if the person you're speaking to is conducive with that approach. Which is to say, you're not going to give us, I wouldn't force somebody to receive prayer if they didn't want prayer, for example. That might make the situation worse. So I think you've got to build relationships, but not rule out physical or mental causes of mental illness from the outset.
Right, and just to echo that is it's kind of funny in a way, but it's not, but it is, if you ask me. But I echo what Marvin just said. But I would add even caveats to that, as the skeptic has the same problems. When you find a mental illness that you can't put your finger on, you start experimental treatments with other forms of things. Like, I mean, I think people grind up tiger's claw to get an aphrodisiac, which doesn't work. It really,
Right, but I would also put that in the
they
category of
also do.
bad.
But
That's bad medicine. It's not medicine when you do that, and so
but there are some of those. But look, there are some of these natural. I didn't finish.
okay.
But there is other natural methods that have worked. Like there are some people that try some experimental treatments that they think has cured them, and it has worked for them. So I mean, you do try other methods. So I mean, the naturals has the same problem, if you ask me.
No, because the naturalist is using naturalist methods. So
Well,
if you're
so
using
and then again, you're looking at a lens from a specific worldview. Naturalism is all there is. So of course you're going to see it that way. That's
well,
fine.
but
You're a
that's
naturalist.
why the examples are different. Naturalists are using the mechanisms that affect the natural being, and if you're saying, yeah, but the being has a problem that's not natural, that's a whole nother realm of thing. And at some point, you have to make a decision that, okay, the natural thing, it didn't work, or it only worked up to this point, and so we've got to try the spiritual thing now. Um, and I would be
Well,
concerned.
that's yeah. Well, that's only a problem because you're a naturalist. You're a naturalist.
Well, but
I mean,
I think I think
your
it can be a
lens, your
problem though
lens.
if someone is going through a medical treatment for their
Mhm.
mental health, and at some point, someone says, uh, what we need to do is a an exorcism because there's 2% demonic activity still going with you. We got you 98% of the way, but we got to do the exorcism for the 2%. And I would ask, well, how do you know that? At what point do you call it, pull the plug, call the exorcist, and say the medicine isn't working? Sometimes the medicine doesn't work fully for everyone, and sometimes the best you can do is reach 70%, 80% uh,
You know, it's
function.
just such it's a difficult personal question. I mean, you can do it like this. You could also cash it out like this, right? There's a person they've been given a say they've been given a terminal uh, diagnosis,
Mhm.
right? They've tried everything to get them out of the depression. The Christian comes along and says, "Well, I'll tell you what we can do. We can pray for you. There is a purpose for you here, purpose for you in this life, and there's a purpose for you in the afterlife. You pray with that person, and it might bring them out of that depression in a way that all natural medicine, you can call it natural medicine, failed." So I don't know. I mean, I can't quantify personally when natural and non-natural solutions to problems work, but I can definitely see that it can work in reverse. And I wouldn't be surprised if it works in reverse more often than not.
Explain what you
Yeah.
mean by that.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think an overarching sense of purpose, meaning, value, right, is a good tool for stable mental health. So I think if there's a person with poor mental health, then say they're a naturalist, reorientating their worldview based on those qualities that I've just mentioned may be the thing that they need to give them good mental health.
Okay, I don't disagree with that. I think there are
So,
ways that a naturalist can, have an overarching sense of purpose and meaning and value. I think that's healthy, and so we might differ on what provides that purpose, meaning, and value. But I think that is a rather healthy thing to
you
have.
know, I think you are right as well. I think we both could argue that there's meaning and purpose, right, and that it could be found in a natural world, it could be found in a spiritual world. But I think that the caveat that I attached to it was that person with the terminal illness.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I see Christianity providing a sense of wellness, given that it's a worldview that encompasses eschatology, future things,
Sure.
in a way that I can't understand that a naturalist worldview can. I
Yeah.
mean, if somebody could convince me, I'm open to suggestions there. But
Perhaps we'll have you back and we'll discuss
the the idea
naturalist
that,
meaning and purpose.
the idea that the person who's dying with cancer, this is not the end from the
I
Christian
think that a
worldview.
person dying with cancer is a different type of situation. I mean, honestly, I'll say something that'll probably piss off half of my audience. You're dying from cancer, and the treatments aren't working, and you're terminal in 6 months. Go to Africa, see a witch doctor. If that's the thing, you got this brochure. You got the man that can do the nose trick and pull out tumors or whatever, and you got the $3,000 to see him. Knock yourself out. Knock
Mhm.
yourself. What harm is it going to do? Uh, and if it makes you feel better, fine with that. Uh, and for that matter, if you want to go to a priest and get absolution, get circumcised when you're 70, whatever whatever you want to do that makes you feel better uh, in your condition. I'm fine with that. I'm not the kind of naturalist that believes people should be cut off from options that make them feel better, because there is a type of naturalism that can be very depressing. Um,
Yeah.
that's I'm a person who doesn't deal in hope. So if you need hope, don't come to me. I'm not a hope guy. Um, I don't. I have no hope for tomorrow, and I feel great about that. But you may not.
Mhm.
So if you need some kind of artificial sense of hope that my brand of naturalism doesn't provide, I'm fine with you seeking that out. Right? That's so I'm not exclusivist in any way. I was in the church way longer in my life than I was not in the church. And I
Mhm.
know where the bodies are buried and things that don't tend to work and have good effect, but I know that where the things are that do often have good effect. And it just depends on the purpose. And just as a practical matter, if being a Christian is what gives you that sense of purpose and makes your life more complete, by all means, stay a Christian, become a Christian. The last thing I want is to deconvert my parents.
Mhm.
They would not make it
Understand.
as an atheist. I don't want to see that. So I'm not the kind of exclusivist that says no one should reach to religion for solutions that they can't find in naturalism.
Sure. And I can agree with you there. And for the purpose of this conversation, for the moment, we can even assume that Christianity is not true. But like you say, and I agree with, if something makes you feel better, okay? So if something makes you feel better, then it's to be preferred. Now, in the sense of ministering to or being pastoral to that dying person, you and I might not have to agree that Christianity is true at this present moment. But if they believe it and it makes them feel better, then I think in that sense, the minister who offers a spiritual solution where a naturalist solution has failed has done a good thing, has done a good service. And I'm glad you agree on that
I do.
point.
I absolutely agree on
Uh,
that point.
and you
So
and you know what's wild is that to me shows your conflictedness, and I think it does the same. I think you could say the same when it comes to this genre of mental health. Uh, we have very different starting points, so it's right for you to ask that question. You know what I mean? But when you have lenses on that preclude the supernatural, you're gonna be worried. So, that does not allow for the supernatural. It does cause a sense of concern. But then when Marvin comes around and says, "Hey, look, but what if all the other options fail?" And you're given whatever makes them feel better, and you agree with that, it shows that conflictedness that I see in you, David. And
I
I,
don't
I
feel at all
think
conflicted though. So
but you're what you just described though to me is a little inconsistency than what the loaded question you had before
how is that inconsistent?
kind of
If a person is terminal, you got to remember
or
this is where things got turned from the original question. If a person is terminal, and now we're not just talking about mental illness, we're talking about cancer. They're going to die in 6 months, no matter what happens physically. Uh, yes, see a shaman. I will help you raise money to go see a shaman. That's fine. Don't care. It's good if that's good for you, great. And if on your deathbed you decide after a life of being a skeptic that you want, your last rites presented by a priest, I, I will put on the priest collar myself and come and do it. Um,
I guess what I was saying is, I'm sorry to interject, is I don't know when you move from the um, the natural to the spiritual in order to cure mental illness, but I can definitely think of some instances where the spiritual will be advantageous in a way that the natural cannot. And the scenario I provided, what I thought I provided, was one instance of that.
well, and I agree that
Sure.
I agree with that instance, but you've got to
But let's
remember,
get back to
I
what's
see.
the
I
question.
believe that
Yeah.
naturalism. There are different forms of naturalism, just like there are different forms of religion, different formulations
Mhm.
of naturalism. I may be a little bit of an extreme form in some ways. I think that spiritualism is bonkers, and I would love for someone to show me this other realm so that I can see that I'm wrong and participate in this other realm. But it
Mhm.
doesn't matter what I think about that. I'm not exclusive in a way that I think that people shouldn't have the freedom, the religious freedom, even to seek out solutions for themselves. Now, part of the problem is if you're dealing with a broken arm and you want to seek out a shaman, but you're a perfectly sound mind, that's on you, man. But
Mhm.
if you're mentally ill, you may not be of sound mind, and you may not be in a good place to understand your medical options. And that's when I would be a lot more wary about a religionist coming along and saying, you know what, never mind this counseling. You've got a spiritual problem. Let's get you exercised. Because they might say, well, okay, but at that point you're talking to like a child who may not be able to distinguish a good idea from a bad idea. And um, I think that's where the concern would be for me, because there's something fundamentally different about mental illness as opposed to, say, cancer. If
Hmm.
I have cancer, I can choose whether I want palliative care. All right, that's I can choose that. I may be depressed, but I can choose. I'm a sound enough mind. I can work my own estate, and I can choose my treatment. If I am actually clinically mentally ill, I cannot.
David, I agree with you. I think this is an area where we have agreed so much so far. I would definitely be wary of that too. This is what I was trying to get across when it comes to uh, the exorcist people that I've talked to. I've talked to three different ones. And uh, they just don't come along and say, "Oh, you need an exorcism." They don't
Hmm.
say that. The first thing they do is get them into a psychologist. And if they don't take the psychologist appointment, if they're not willing to, if they think that they're dealing with something spiritual, and the priest says, yeah, it could be, but here's the first step: you got to go see a psychologist, and they don't do that, they don't get the exorcism either.
Okay.
There's so they have to follow exactly all these steps. And yeah, and I was gonna say something, like you said, sometimes people, there's a difference between the person with the cancer versus the mentally ill. And I would just say, think about like having to actually hide sharp objects around, because that it is terminal in a way sometimes. It can be, and it's the unpredictable and the unpredictableness of that terminality, you know, and sometimes you're just lucky that you got to them in time to take them to a hospital, so where they could get that. But yeah, buddy, I hear you. And this is where I praised you guys so much, was because you recognize, hey, look, there is a problem within religion. And I loved how you also said, hey, we do it too as skeptics. you know we mess up when it comes to this at times, and we have messed up, and we have caused trauma, and sometimes we've caused more trauma than we have good, but we've also done a lot of good too.
So let me ask just one more question, and I will just leave it to you guys to talk about what you will. But this one is on my mind, and I actually have a realistic concern for this question, because I still have a lot of friends and family in
Hmm.
religion, and when I was in religion, I didn't know how to deal with this, and I don't know how to advise anyone now from a Christian perspective. And so uh, I appreciate it if you guys take this question on, which is, so as we know, mental illness can be the catalyst, cause you to do things that you would otherwise not do or say if you were mentally healthy. And one of the common things connected to bipolar is drug addiction,
Hmm.
addictions of all kinds. So, as a Christian, you're naturally going to frown on a drug lifestyle. You'd probably consider that a sin, no matter how legal some government says it is. I personally think it's ill-advised to legalize some drugs. So I'm not a raving leftist in that sense. I know what drugs are. There's a reason that you have to have a prescription to buy things, in pharmacies. So that said, you have a person who is a drug addict, or they're acting out in some other way. There are worse things than drug addiction, um, and yet they're a Christian, a member of church. So how do you? Are they sinning? Is this should they be treated like a sinner in need of church discipline, or should they be treated like a sick person who is in need of healing? Because those are two very different things, but it's the same behavior. So,
Yeah,
what do you do with that?
I think they should be treated like a sick person in need of healing, with the caveat that it also is to what extent
Mm.
that their addictive behavior is disruptive. If the behavior is disruptive to a certain extent, then it's not going to be conducive with being in a congregation. I remember when I was in a small congregation in the UK around 91, 92, a fellow got into crack, and then he'd be like sitting in the congregation and he'd like pee his pants, right? Now, I'm not sure that that is conducive with having families, small children sat around listening to a sermon to a guy who's sort of exhibiting that level of addicted behavior. Now, his brother brought him to the church because obviously his brother wants him to receive some release, some healing, some kind of change in behavior that is going to get him out of that crack addiction. But I think that was an example of perhaps where he was not in the right state to be in the church unless he was determined to do something about his addiction.
That's a tough place because there is so little that one can do
Hmm.
about their addiction and your mental health. There are different states of mental health,
Hmm.
of course, associated with that, and so you might be mildly mentally ill, but just a bad person.
Hmm.
So, I mean, you might be both. You may be mentally ill and a bad person. If you weren't mentally ill, you'd still be a bad person. Um,
Hmm.
but I've got to think that if mental illness, kind of like the demonic, if mental illness, actual biological mental illness, is any part of your behavior, then all of it has to be treated like health issue in need of treating. Because while you have some part of it that's mental illness, you cannot separate the person and the behavior from the illness. It's inseparable. And so if you can cure the mental illness, then you can deal with a person who is competent to stand trial. But I mean, there's a reason why there has to be a competency test for someone to stand
Sure.
trial for things that they do. And I don't think we always get that right. But yeah, I
Yeah, and
think it's
there is
pretty tough
also a
there.
control factor, David. There's also that control factor too, right? Where like, if they're presenting themselves as a danger to the public, that they're putting controlled positions, to not allow them to hurt the public, and at that point they still have to be treated, right? I
Right.
mean, and that's how we should. That's how the church. I mean, the church is supposed to be the place where bad people come to get better,
Mhm.
and it also is the place where the mentally ill should be taken care of.
Right.
We're supposed to do that. We're called to do that. We're called in the Bible to. If we're not doing that, then by all means, run away from that church.
Yeah, but you
You
see,
know.
I agree with Marvin as much as I disagree with him. Uh, a an example that I faced a lot of times in the church. Um, as a church leader, you never know what the right thing to do is necessarily. It's a case by case situation, but sometimes a drunk person would, wander in. They are three sheets to the wind. Um, and what in the most of the churches I attended, some deacon like persons, let's call them bouncers, would very gently, without making a scene, usher them uh, out because they're drunk, they stink, they peed and shit themselves, they're making noises, um, and they're obviously not drawing from the preaching or whatever. This is a person who is sick. It's like the demoniac with the legion of demons. This is a person you can't deal with or reason with. And you are faced with two choices, it seems. You can keep them there and pretend uh, like everything's okay when it's not, or you can say you're too sick for this hospital. And when you sober up, then we'll send around someone to talk to you. And neither one of those seem like good choices. Another thing you can do is have a segregation room where you take that person and, say, here, there's speakers here, there's a monitor, you can enjoy the service here. But now you just segregated the assembly. So these are the the good sick people and those are the bad sick people. Look, I'm not. It's not easy, and
Mhm.
I'm telling you honestly, I don't know what the right answer is. Neither as a skeptic or a Christian, I don't know what the right answer is for that type of person. Because if I were doing some kind of skeptic convention and the same thing happened there, I'd be faced with the same choice.
Wow.
And even if I understood that this person is obviously mentally ill, that's I still got a conference to run.
Mhm.
Right.
Right. And that's the thing. There's a difference when I say this, David. I say there's a difference between the assembly, the gathering and the preaching and all that than being the church. Like, I'm not giving up on that guy just because I have to maybe isolate him because he's out of control and there's problems. He's a danger to the congregation, or he's a danger to your skeptics meeting,
Or
or
let's
he's a
just face it, it
danger
just
to
smells
society.
bad, and it sings too
If
loud and
he
is
then get over
disruptive.
your smells, right? And he's not if he's not bothering anybody and he's just sitting there listening and just stinks a little bit, I'm
I'm
not gonna
sorry, I
worry
can't get over the smells.
too much.
I live in New Jersey. I'm in New York all the time. I know what people smell like when they have been living in shit for 3 days in the same clothes. It is
Mhm.
not healthy. It's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for the people
Yeah,
around them.
well, yeah, yeah,
You
you're
can't
actually
just
making
sit
people
there
sick. But
going.
David, you're ignoring what I'm saying though, is that I'm saying there's when if somebody is causing people actually physical sickness, they're being a present danger in some sort of way. You're causing people to get sick. But like that's all I'm saying, man. Is all I'm saying is that you treat the people like you said. You treat people. Of course, you've got to have measures in place for all sorts of things, and that are common to us all. I mean, we do it societally. We would do it in a skeptics convention, just like you'd have to do it in a church. But as a church, I think that we are called to treat. We are called to help people, and if that is getting them a psychologist, then that's getting them a psychologist. Like I told you when I was talking to the Catholic priest, they pay for the psychologist. It's all through the church. They pay for it all,
So
and they would pay for the treatment of that person.
look, guys, you've tolerated me on this panel, and I appreciate that. I've had some questions. I've tried to bring in the audience a little bit, but this is and always has been truly your show and your perspective. I know that Russell has brought some research. I know that Russell has thought about some of the questions asked at the end of the show. I'm not sure if you uh, watched the show or thought about some of those questions, Marvin, but I'm going to ask you to moderate your own damn selves for the duration and talk
Sure.
about the stuff that you have brought with you. And I appreciate your indulgence, allowing me to be
Thanks.
able to question.
So I'll let you start, Marvin. Go
Um, I'm here to learn from you, Russell.
ahead. Well, I think it would. I love answering your guys' questions, and I think you guys brought up, and David, I kind of answered yours. You said as a as a Christian, how do you tell the difference between someone who is wrong and needs questions answered versus someone with mental issues, right? You did ask that one, and I would say that, yeah, I mean, you have to. It takes getting to know. It takes getting in the weeds with them. It takes getting into um a relationship with them, I think, in some way, shape, or form, some way, shape, or capacity. So that's what I kind of wanted to bring there. But we kind of already answered that as we went. So, um, Marvin, do you have anything to say on that one?
No, you answered that well. I think the only way that you can tell if it's a natural illness or a spiritual illness is by getting to know somebody. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine, a little bit older than me, went back to the UK, as I mentioned, a couple of years ago, and had a bad time. Things didn't work out for him. Had to come back to Hong Kong, and then was in a very severe depression when he got back to Hong Kong. And I just knew that it was a depression. I didn't, in my mind, I didn't think to say to him, it's a demonic spirit that is oppressing you. I did pray for him because I wanted to, but I always thought that it was sort of a natural problem that was brought about by a broken mind. And the reason that his mind was broken was because of the experience that he went through. Similar thing happened about 15 years ago when a friend of mine did just too many recreational drugs. And then he got himself into a kind of a psychosis where he was just repeating the same thing over and over again. And in that sense, as in that instance, my friends and I prayed for him a lot, but thought, still sent him back to the UK to go with his mum so he could have the correct kind of psychiatric counselling. And I think that he'd done something to his brain, through overloading it with recreational drugs. So um, I mentioned at the beginning of the show that back in the 90s, I went to pray for a guy, and his whole countenance changed and his voice changed. And that was a sort of a very eerie experience. I think in that instance, then I would have thought, I'm confronted with something here that doesn't seem natural to me. Then I would pray for him. Then I
Right.
would consider that to be a spiritual encounter.
Right. What I think is really interesting here is I'll tell you a story, and you guys can tell me I'm crazy or whatever, David. I don't care. uh, but
I don't use that word
I will
anymore.
start.
And you can't
Yeah,
really
I don't use that.
convince people
But
of what you've experienced.
I do want to say that uh, we learned from Annalise. Oh man, Annalise. Oh, I can't remember her last name, but Exorcism of Emily Rose, that the girl, the actual person that happened to. Um, they the exorcist I've interviewed said, "Hey, look, these guys, did this absolutely wrong, and this is why she died. She died of dehydration and malnutrition. And the reason is because they didn't take all the necessary steps to do anything with this exorcism or whatever, right? And I want to let everybody know, like, from the guys I've talked to, that I mean, these people are hooked. When they go to an exorcism, if they deem it as an exorcism, I mean, they hook, you know, the blood pressure monitor to them, give them IVs, they go through proper stuff. They have a doctor right there, you know. So when they actually do these exorcisms, I mean, that's what they have to do. I mean, that's part of their protocol. Um, so yeah, I
But
was in
isn't that
Puerto
only
Rico.
true though when you're dealing with someone inside of an official denominational structure like a Catholic priest? There are things that you have to do and study to get there, and there's a hierarchy that's answerable to themselves and the law and things like that. But in some other denomination, some
It's not
independent
there.
church, you don't have any of those
Yeah.
protections.
Yeah, and you know what? Those are the ones that I think we would come side by side saying, "Hey, look, this is nonsense. You're killing somebody." And when things like that happen, yeah, I'm totally against it. I'm totally against them doing things where it's going to harm an individual. I love people. I pride myself on loving people, and David, the shows that we've been about, I make the show about you guys. I always try to show love and respect to all my guests. And it's just because I love people. I mean, I know you said you had no hope, but you love people too, man. I don't want to hear your nonsense, man. Otherwise, you wouldn't be talking to them. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to hear other people's voices other than your own. But
I
no,
love some
it's
people.
deep down and it's deep down in you. I know it. Um, but
I,
no,
I
honestly,
love
so I was in.
persons. I hate
Yeah,
people. So,
I agree. I agree with you, David. And what I would say is, it's easy. It's good to say I agree with you, David, because you both stop. And what I would say is, as a Protestant, I think Protestants can learn from the Catholic Church in being more rigorous in this regard. And I think p- part of the frustration that probably people like you have, and part of the exasperation that people like me have, is that the hyper fundamentalists see everything as spiritual, right? Everything as an infestation of demons, from cornflakes to credit cards to, and it's just non-stop.
well, let's be clear, cornflakes are demonic. Uh,
only when
yeah,
they're not frosted.
Well,
that's right.
you get my point. We've all encountered people like that who kind of are just hyper
So
fundamentalists, and they
so I
see
had a
hidden meaning and sort of spiritual significance in everything.
So I'll give you my specific story of when I think I actually encountered a demonic versus, just somebody suffering from mental illness. Okay. When I was in Puerto Rico taking care of my mom, she said that she knew a guy that, he claimed that he was part of, the Anaki. He was a part lizard man, and
Mm.
he suffered from stigmata. So I got to meet this guy, right? I really did, and it was great to get to know him. I even took a picture with him, and loved on him and became good friends with him while I was down there. And I think that there was more going on with him than just mental health. And the reason was is and I could be wrong. I leave that door open. I'm not a professional in this. And I'm so weary about saying you're possessed and this is a demonic possession because I had already done one of those interviews before I went to see this guy. And I didn't try to do no exorcism. I didn't take that step. I left the door open for me to be wrong, and I did something different than what other people did. And it made a lasting change in this man's life. And it feels good to know that I made an impact in his life. But as I was down there and we were talking, outside, and my dad has a bar that we kind of sit at and just chat and chill in his carport. Puerto Rico's hot, you know. You could stay, sit out all night in shorts and a t-shirt, but yeah. So we're talking, and it was we were talking about religion and God and stuff like this, and then I noticed just out of nowhere, like this guy just he looks like there's something wrong with him, and he's like, "Ah, man," and he pulls up the back of his shirt. He has like whip marks. There's no way he could have escaped my view and got these himself. Where the heck did they come from? You know, I so and it weirded me out a little. I was like, okay, he says he suffers from the stigmata stuff. I don't know if that's what it is. I was like, I don't think God does that. I don't think that's a real thing. I think that could be something on the evil side and stuff like this. So I don't know when it was, but as we continued to talk and say, "Hey, man, do you want anything for that?" I don't. It wasn't severe enough for him to actually get first aid or anything like that. I'm a first responder, and I pretty much could tell that. I mean, it wasn't that bad, but it was weird. So like it went in my weird category, and I started playing Psalms 51 in Aramaic. It was just random. It was like something that came up my feed. I thought it sounded pretty, and I just started playing it. Kind of like it was kind of, we had stopped talking for a little bit. We're dealing with my stepdad who was like passing out, kind of drunk. I started playing that after we got him in the hammock, and he starts hissing out of nowhere and starts tensing up and rolling his head and just weird things. I stopped playing it. And I'm just like, okay, but all inside of me, inside of my spirit, what I would consider my soul, deep inside of me is like, this guy's either severely oppressed or could be possessed. But I'm not going to go that far. I'm not going to go that far in saying that. So again, there was a couple other weird things that happened that kind of solidified it in my mind saying, yeah, but I offered to pray for him. I just offered to pray for him. I didn't offer to do an exorcism. I showed him love, respect, and I prayed for him and I asked him if I could pray for him. He let me pray for him. And he, to this day, my stepdad, when I talk to him, this guy asks about me and says that time of our prayer was one of the most peaceful times he ever felt in his life. He had the greatest sense of peace during that time
Mm.
of prayer, and he'll never forget it. And still I'll talk to him on the phone here and there, this and that, but it was eye opening, and yeah. So I do think it's real. Um, of course, being a believer, of course, we believe in these things. We do believe in these things.
No, I got to stop you
So
there. Not all believers do. I was not
well,
the
you're right. You're right. There are some that
I was not the kind of Christian who believed in that type of demonic activity. What we would have said was that God, after a certain period in the first century, restrained the demons. So this is why you don't have demon possessions today. Otherwise, they would just be running rampant and taking over the world. And so, whereas we believed all of the Bible stories and things like that, took them very literally, we also had a framework for not
Okay.
seeing demons around every corner. And
yes,
so
yeah,
you know,
being a cessationist.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I agree. There are cessationists, but and here's another thing is one thing that constrained me, and we're of course I told you guys I'm not an expert in these things, and I wouldn't be able to. I don't think I had it within me to say you were possessed. And another reason for that is because the man had gone through a lot in his life. He had gone through. I mean, he killed his stepfather for hitting his mom, and he went into jail for 13, 14 years.
that kind of
Um,
seems justified to
that
me.
can mess you. That can mess you up.
I,
But the thing is here's the problem with what he did is that he had already beaten up the guy and then just kept going. So he got hit with manslaughter versus murder.
I understand, and I'm
So
revealing more
you know
about
how the law
myself, but
works.
I'm not a
But
turn the other cheek guy. And
yeah,
if you assault my wife, I will probably beat you until dead, and I'll just take my time in jail, and which will be forever.
well,
But I kind of get that. I'll be honest with you, and I hope I wouldn't do that, but I'm 50 and I grew up in the South, and I've got a feeling my Southern lizard brain would take over.
so yeah, but all those things that came into play, you know, so that was my story. But I did want to get to the question Matthew answered or asked, and he said, "Why seek a Christian counselor over a secular one? Well, I can be honest with you, Matthew. I was concerned about worldviews and stuff like that. It was more of a cautionary thing because honestly, when you come from a background where you've had to evolve from a fundamentalist background, they drill it into you that psychologists are bad, right?
Mhm.
So, I always thought that they were, if it wasn't a Christian psychologist, they would, fill my loved one's head with lies and not have good methods. And then you grow and you educate yourself and you realize that a lot of these people that do these counseling and 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 you know what? Now, let me give you a caveat. You should investigate what counselors you use. You should always investigate.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Investigate. But then you realize that some of these people, they do it because they love your kids. They love people. And I'll tell you a secret. My loved one's counselor is a secularist. He's a secular one. They're not religious. So yeah, and she's great. And she's got her studies, she does her stuff. But I can also tell you that there are wonderful Christian counselors out there that do not uh tell you what is it? I know some of the counselors that you guys brought up will they say that I think Clint was talking that they have a certain thing that they have to say, or a certain way they go about counseling, saying, "Oh, it's this and that." No, they actually do like secular. They do the same methods. They do the same methods. Why? Because those methods work. Those behavioral methodologies work. Uh, and they might not work for all people, but they do work. And they use the same methods that any secular psychologist would use. And they don't force religion on you. And there's wonderful Christian counselors out there that are like that. So I do want. So that's my answer there for
Let me
Matthew.
let me jump. Let
Matthew's
me just
question.
pile onto that a moment because I fully concur with your answer. And at the time Matthew asked the question, I thought about it a little bit. And what here's the thing: I've seen more doctors than any one person should see for any number of ailments over the course of my lifetime. I've seen many Christian doctors, Muslim doctors, lots of Muslim doctors. I've seen uh, doctors from different cultures. I'd say half of the doctors I've ever had were Indian, Pakistani. A lot of them go into the medical field, and they are generally not Christian, but often religious, and that does not factor into my decision when I choose a doctor for any medical condition. Mental health is a medical condition. They've got to go through the same schools and programs as anyone else, and there's no reason to be bigoted toward a clinician because of their religion. So unless they do something or say something that reveals an underlying bias that changes how they do their job, it's simply a non issue. And so whether a Christian goes to a Christian counselor or not is irrelevant. What they need to be going to see is a good counselor. And so if you want to investigate, where your counselor did their studies, and if you have some if you have some hard information about certain programs, which programs are good and put out good, successful counselors, and which programs have been problematic, maybe you can make your decision based on that. But making your decision strictly based on religion, I think, is as reprehensible as making your decision based on race or anything else. So I would not I don't have any problem with Christians going to Christian counselors or seculars going to Christian counselors or Christians going to secular counselors. As long as that is not the factor. If you were actually looking for a Christian to give Christianized um, mental health advice, that's a problem. What you need to be looking for is a good mental health expert, and there are plenty of Christians that are good mental health experts.
Marvin, you want to input on that one?
No, I just think that David, you're right. I just think that you need to see somebody who's qualified qualified to administer professional mental health, and that's based on professional protocols. I don't think it's based on um, Christian or secular protocols. Though there might be worldview issues at base, I still think you just find a good clinician. So, for example, you might in this if we talk in terms of children with autism, okay, there's a recognized behavioral therapy in which you will try to reinforce positive behavior in that child by giving rewards, and you will punish uh, negative behavior in that child by taking away rewards. It's a little bit controversial, but the point is there's a certain protocol that a qualified therapist must follow. Now, at base, I think there may be worldview differences, but the treatment must be recognized treatment in order for that person to be a recognized clinician. You have a PhD in psychology. You're not going to get a PhD in psychology from a recognized school if you say it was demons, and that's all you say. So yeah, I can agree with that, and my in the teaching that I use, I went to a secular university, and the methods and the psychology that I learned is secular. You could say it's secular. I mean, I'm obviously a Christian, but I don't have special sort of methods of teaching based on spirituality in the same way that I don't think that there would be special methods of giving clinical treatment based on spirituality.
Right. And
So,
I just throw that caveat in to say, as Christians, we believe God created a real world with real
right,
rules, real limitations, and stuff like that. That there are going to be methodologies that we all share. You know what I
mm,
mean? There's going to be ways to deal with the death and decay, supposedly, that we experience in this life. And there's going to be certain methods. There's going to be certain things that help us. There's going to be certain things that don't, and we're all going to be able to benefit from it in one way, shape, or form, or it's going to work to our detriment. I was just thinking about, me and the wife, we love to make wine. We make wine. We've got about 6 different vintages out our bottles out right now, different kinds of wines that we made, and I can either abuse that or not. It could either help me or be a detriment to me and kill my liver. You know what I mean? So, But anyways, I'm at the last question, and it was Clinton says, "Do we see Christianity cause mental health issues?"
Repeat the question
Yes.
again. You were turned away for a lot of that.
Oh, Clint, let me bring my notes over here. Clinton asked, "Do we see Christianity cause mental health issues?" And I think I've already answered that in a way. I think that yes, you have seen fundamentalist Christianity cause a lot of things, and I wanted to bring in the meta-analysis here, um, of overall, because I think at some point where I told you that I thought the conversation kind of devolved, but y'all brought it back, was that time I think you kind of bunched up and really put one view of Christianity out there versus all the other views. Um, but the meta analysis talk about people that are um, that have a form of religiosity um, have lower health and mental issues. And this is from studies and meta analysis. And I'm going to throw a caveat into that and say that um, it's not to say, it doesn't say that this is a totality thing, because these meta-analysis, they deal with certain portions of population. Just because they're getting this in a certain demographic or in a certain area doesn't mean it applies for every single thing. Every single person. They can just say, hey, look, this is what we found. So the meta-analysis from the Psychiatric Times says of 93 observational studies, 2/3 found lower rates of depressive disorder with fewer depressive symptoms in persons who were more religious. In 34 studies, that did not find a similar relation, and only 4 found that being religious was associated with more depression. Only 4. So that was out of an observational study of 93 from the Psychiatric Times. You can get that at the www.psychiatrictimes.com. Is religion good for mental health? This comes from NAMI, which is the mental health benefits. Or wait, no, NAMI is the oh man, I don't have their name, but they're a national board of psychiatrists and stuff too. They said religion gives people something to believe in. It provides a sense of structure. Typically offers group offers a group of people to connect with uh, um, others with similar beliefs. These facets can have a large positive effect on mental health. Research suggests that religiosity reduces suicide rates, alcoholism, and drug use, according to NAMI. Um, so that also says several authors conclude, and this is from ScienceDirect.com, says several authors conclude that having some type of religious affiliation was related to lower anxiety levels. Um, Psychology Today said that research suggests that higher levels of religiosity are associated with lower rates of depression, anxiety, substance abuse disorder, and suicidal behavior. These are just some things that they pulled together from some meta-analysis that suggests that Christianity is actually good for people, and religiosity in general, spiritualism, whatever, does have a positive effect on mental health. I've also noticed that it's more for like uh, depression and not things that are caused from like chemical imbalances in your brain. So to answer Clint's question in a roundabout way, yes, Christianity does do some harmful things, and I think we've covered that well when we were talking about fundamentalism uh, and abuse. But it also can do a lot of good too. So I want to caveat that with saying, hey, I think that religious belief in Christianity has done a lot of good and has been a very positive force. And the right type of Christianity, I think, will do the right thing for people.
Yeah, I would add a caveat that I mean I can give you competing studies that would give different um, answers. Part of the problem is Christianity is too big of a tent to use it as any kind of control group because everything's Christian. Just look at how how many different diverse things can still fall under the range of Christianity. And so you can talk about the hyper conservatives, but you can also talk about the hyper liberals. And
Yeah, I mean,
what
people
even
don't like
is
uniformity.
Christianity? What even is Christianity anymore? And so it's really hard to say, well, Christianity uh, caused this or Christianity helped this because you've
Well,
got a lot of other factors going in there. And since almost everyone and everything could be called, I could be called a Christian under some definitions because once saved, always saved. So, it's really, really tough to,
Here's the thing. Well, here's the thing is David. The way I look at that is I would probably disagree a little bit on some aspects of it, but I think you're right in the vast majority of what you're saying. But I would say that I do see a unity amongst Christianity versus but I do also want to say that uh as human beings as human beings in themselves, there's there's no uniformity. There's not a sometimes I we don't like uniformity. None of us. A lot of us like to discover things on our own and add to it or put to it, but I don't think there's uniformity in Christianity either. but there is unity, and I think that's kind of like how mankind operates. But that's
Right.
just me.
But I'm not I'm not
I'll let you finish. I'm done speaking. I've answered all my questions. I'm done. I'm going home.
yeah, okay. Well, look, I'm not arguing with any of that. I'm just saying that using Christianity as a kind of a data point to say, well, more Christians are blank or Christianity causes blank. That's not helpful. What we should be looking more at are the aspects of Christianity that you want to gauge. So, for instance, um, if you believe that homosexuality is a sin and an abomination to God, I think that we can narrow that down and say that can be mentally harmful for someone who's a homosexual. Um, it's not useful to say, well, Christianity caused that harm, because the majority, slight majority of Christians have no problem with homosexuality. So it's not a fair thing to put that harm at the feet of Christianity, and yet certain Christianities specialize in that kind of thinking. And so rather than just trying to use this blanket umbrella of saying, does Christianity cause harm or does it cause good? I think we have to break it down further and say what aspects of Christianity, of certain kinds of Christianity, cause harm and try to avoid those, and what aspects of certain Christianities cause good, and try to replicate those things.
Yeah, I
I
agree,
think
David. And one thing, just one thing. I'm gonna let you go, Marvin. One thing is that I didn't get from your episode where I said it devolved. I got the exact opposite feeling when you guys were talking. But I'm glad you said that and clarified that. Thanks, David.
Yeah.
I was going to say, unfortunately, I have to agree that there are aspects of Christianity that are. I say aspects of Christianity. There are people within Christianity that sort of live lives in a way that is detrimental to mental health. For example, you could be at a denomination there and they'll tell you um, such and such has been to hell, and it'll give you all the details of hell. Okay, and basically they'll just have such a negative spin on life that they put the believers, these hyper fundamentalists, put the believers in a kind of a defensive position where I think their mental health is compromised. Yeah, and I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm, although I'm a charismatic and a post Pentecostal, I'm still sort of conservative, but I try to temper the excesses of charismatics and some Pentecostals who I come across who put this sort of spiritual spin on everything that can be detrimental to people's health, right? Because they end up putting those people in a place of fear. You might say not living their best lives, which I don't think is the point of Christianity. You know, I hope I was kind of got my point across there. The second thing that I would like to throw out is that I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but it was an inaugural speech, I think, that somebody gave the idea that even if religion is not true, it ought to be adopted in what they call the noble lie. And one of the ideas was that a noble lie is just better for mental health. It allows people to have a bigger purpose, live beyond themselves, achieve more, etc. So, in that sense, religions are good for mental health. Obviously, I think Christianity is true, so it's the best. But I think religions are generally good for mental health, unless they're asking you to blow people up.
I think at this stage of human development, there is a place for religion.
Hmm.
Uh, so obviously, I don't think religions are true, and I would lean more on the side of opiate for the masses. But
Mhm.
that said, I think that's becoming less and less true as we go. But in our lifetime, I mean, evolution is a very slow thing. Social evolution is a very slow thing. And I just think that where humankind is right now, if you snatched the religion rug out from under everybody right now, just kind of cold turkey, your society would have devolved in so rapidly. I think the human race would die out in 100 years.
Mhm.
I don't think we can go cold turkey off of that
Mhm.
opiate. But that said, I think that some religions are healthier than others. So, for instance, I'm constantly in dispute with Peter, our friend Peter, over on Red Letters. He has he's been a member since day one. I think it was maybe the first or second one to sign up, and he brings his battle axe every week, and we battle. And he's very smart, and I appreciate him. I think he's wrong with his every utterance, but I want him to win. I
Yeah.
really want him to win because his brand of Christianity, I think, would be the most mentally healthy brand
Mhm.
of religion I can think of. What do I believe it's true? No, but do I believe the world would be a better place if they adopted that instead of, say, Islam? Yes, I do. So,
Mhm.
um, I would. One of the reasons I argue with him is to try to help him sharpen his arguments and ideas and maybe become more convincing. Um, because I think that some of his ideas are just untested and unsharpened, and they need to go through the crucible. But
Mhm.
I want him to win. I really do. And there are other Christians like that I can name. I disagree with Randall Rouser's every utterance, but I want him to win. I
That's very
I
kind.
want him to win.
Yeah.
He is a his ideas are a lot more sustainable, I think, and are a lot healthier. Now, uh, at some point, maybe we can all live without an overarching story
Mhm.
that tells us who we are, where we came from, what our purpose is, and I think all of that's pretty artificial stuff, but it certainly serves a purpose. And I don't want to snatch that out from under people. So when I debate people, I want to make sure that I'm debating people who are mentally strong, who are strong in their faith, who know who they are, and let's just battle it out, and the listeners can enjoy it. But I don't want to debate someone who's on the bubble and whose life might go to hell if I win. You shouldn't listen to the show if you're that person. I
Yeah.
don't want to destroy your faith. I don't consider deconversions as notches on the belt. Unless you're good for that, unless you're ready for that. So yeah, I know that Christians don't like the term opiate for the masses, but um, I'm with you on that, Marvin. And I think that I've worked with Christian groups as an atheist, and I just want to see the ones that are healthier for humanity to become more dominant.
Yeah. I agree. I wonder. I want to throw this out. I wonder if atheists are able to live without an overarching story of who we are, where we came from, and where we're going. Or is that a story that the whole of mankind must have?
So
I think we, I
you
think
can
we
you can
all
make
have.
an agreement in principle that you will
I
come
think
back
we all.
and discuss
I
it
think
with
we all
me
have stories,
vigorously.
but I think one story is a story of materialism, and another is a classic story with a protagonist, you might say. But I do think we all have that story, and I think that's part of what it is to be human, to try to make sense of ourselves in the world.
Yeah. So I'm not going to take the bait. I'm that's good bait. I'm going to let it dangle there. And I will take the bait on one condition. You come
Yeah.
back and debate it with me.
Okay, that's a
And
good deal.
if it makes you feel better, we can have David Russell moderate it.
Sounds good. Yeah.
And we can even do it on his show. So happy to do it.
Yeah, anytime, guys. Yeah, I'd love to put it together.
Okay,
Uh, yeah,
It sounds very
but I think that's
sounds
it for me, David. I that's all I got for you guys today.
that's all I got for you guys. So look, I think that we can eschew the long-winded closing statement, except it's tradition now, so it has to be given at least a nod. So I am going to say, as my final part of this, uh, first to Marvin personally, I have always enjoyed talking to Marvin live. I have always hated communicating with Marvin on the board. Jekyll and fucking Hyde. I don't know what the hell. I love this Marvin, and I'm fairly sure they're the same person, but maybe he's got a twin. I have no idea. This is why I want Marvin on these shows, because I want people to see in Marvin what I see in Marvin. Um,
Mhm.
an extremely uh, cogent, reasonable um, conversationalist that is thoughtful and uh, careful and just fun to talk to.
Mhm.
That's what I was able to see early on, and every time I have one of these conversations live with you, that's just validated further. So everybody who has a problem with Marvin, who's got Marvin blocked. I've blocked Marvin many times. He's an asshole. Marvin is a fucking asshole. I hate him and I love him. And this is the guy that I love. Let's just try again. Just keep trying because he's worth it. And I don't mind spending some social capital in saying it. He's worth it. So keep trying. And I know that Marvin is the kind of person who's willing to keep trying. And I thank you for coming to the show and bringing that, frankly, the most reasonable voice on this episode. So I appreciate that very
Well,
much.
thank you,
Um,
David.
I always appreciate David Russell. He always brings the research. He always brings a little bit of attitude. He is also someone who will make you dig into the issues a little bit more, push you a little bit more to think about it. And these are people that whose company I enjoy and I appreciate. I feel like a guest on someone else's show. I want to thank you for letting me on your show. um, so that said, isn't it surprising how much agreement about a thing like this people of so different worldviews can have?
It
And
is.
and if we can do this, the three of us can find this much common ground on such an important issue. I've got to think that it's the start, the beginning of an extremely fruitful, useful conversation. And so when you come to this in your comments on the board, just try to bring some of this spirit with you. We can fight over all kinds of other garbage. I enjoy the battle. I like getting my hands dirty just as much as everybody else. But this issue is so important. We can do something better. And we've seen the beginning of that here. And I just want to thank all of the people who showed up for both shows to make it so great. I appreciate that. If you guys want to plug your shows or what have you again, you can have the last word.
I just want to say thanks for having me on the show, David. It's been a pleasure as ever. It's always uh, challenging to speak to you, and you come up with some really, really interesting ideas and suggestions. So it's good to dialogue because we make each other better. I think on the board, I'll be on the board, and I just say that if things are getting heated, like you say, just ease off, think about it, then dialogue, and then we're all better for that. We can all do better. You know? We all step out of bounds at sometimes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The
No,
issue
I've
is to recognize that, and just ease off, you know.
Russ.
Right
Pleasure meeting,
on. Well,
pleasure meeting
yeah,
David as well, because I've never been in dialogue uh, for any length of time with you, so it's a pleasure.
yeah, it was definitely a pleasure to be with both of you guys today. Again, the Skeptics and Seekers family, I love all you guys. We have disagreed in the past, but the entire family that was always welcoming to me, and even if we disagreed, was always great to me. And especially you, David, I love you very much, and think you're an excellent host, and you have a voice that should be on radio all the time. So,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, it's great that we could come together and discuss this because it's very real and it affects all of us. It affects all of our lives. We're surrounded by it in one way, shape, or form. You had 100% turnout as far as people dealing with it. Everybody in this board, whether they're skeptics or whether they're seekers, they were all affected by it. So it's very serious. It's something that I face daily with my loved one. And it's something that I have faced in the past, and I've kind of grown up with it too, with even my stepfather and his mental health issues. So I've got a lot of experience with it, and even when I have that experience, and even though I've had that experience and what I've been through with my family and friends and stuff like that, I've still scratched the surface. You know, I'm still learning, and I'm still learning how to talk. I'm still learning how to get rid of old ideas and put in new ones because the old ones didn't help my loved one. The way I dealt with things in the past didn't help for how I need to deal with things in the future. Uh, I think we all need to continue to be open, and all will need to live in a state of learning when it comes to mental health. And we need to, man, have compassion for one another. Um, and as you guys go on the boards and discuss this further, have compassion for one another. It goes a long ways, and it furthers the conversation. And where sometimes it will just can put up a block, and even as you see how me and David and Marvin agreed on a lot of different things coming from different perspectives, we can come together and further the conversation, when we show that type of respect and compassion towards one another. I'm David Russell with Faith Unaltered, former host of SNS. I wear that title proudly because I went through a lot. David put me through a lot. But I enjoyed every step and every bruise and every time I was able to learn from the Skeptics and Seekers family. And I thank you guys for that. So if you want to check more of us out, go to YouTube's Faith Unaltered. You can find us there on anywhere on podcast and even on KEQQ in Grand Rapids, North Dakota. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, and we will see you all when we come back to talk about overarching purpose.
interesting.
All right, bye bye now.
Take care. Bye.